At 70, I thought I'd earned the right to some peace and quiet. So I bought a coastal retreat in Mendocino, installed a security system, and didn't tell a soul, not even my daughter Sienna. But on my very first night there, the alarm shattered the silence at 3:15 a.m. When I stepped outside to investigate, I discovered something that terrified me, and realized that the most dangerous predator wasn't lurking outside my house. It was already inside my family. Before we continue, please subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching this story unfold. I'd love to know where my fellow listeners are from. After burying my beloved wife Adeline 3 years ago, I'd spent too many nights rattling around in our old Portland home, surrounded by memories that both comforted and haunted me. Every creaking floorboard seemed to whisper her name. Every empty chair at the dinner table reminded me of conversations we'd never have again. So when I saw the listing for a modest beach house in Mendocino, something inside me stirred for the first time since her funeral. $650,000 was no small sum for a retired accountant, but Adeline and I had been careful savers our whole marriage. Live a little, Bernie, she used to say, always the dreamer to my pragmatist. Well, darling, I finally took your advice. The house wasn't much to look at from the outside, a weathered cedar-shingled cottage perched on a bluff overlooking the Pacific. But it had good bones, as Adeline would have said, and more importantly, it was mine. No well-meaning neighbors dropping off casseroles with pitying smiles. No children. Well, child, since Sienna was all we'd been blessed with, hovering around asking if I was managing okay on my own. I'd installed a comprehensive security system the day I moved in. Call it an old man's paranoia, but living alone at my age, you can't be too careful. The technician, a kid who couldn't have been older than my grandson if I'd had one, seemed impressed by my thoroughness. Motion sensors, door alarms, cameras covering every angle. This is some serious setup, Mr. Coleman, he'd said. You expecting trouble? Just preparing for it, I'd replied. I should have listened to my own advice. The alarm shattered the silence at exactly 3:15 in the morning on my very first night. The piercing shriek cut through my dreams like a knife, jolting me awake with my heart hammering against my ribs. For a moment, I lay there in the unfamiliar darkness, disoriented and groggy. Then training kicked in. 40 years of methodical thinking doesn't just disappear because you hit retirement. I grabbed my robe and the baseball bat I'd kept beside the bed since Adeline passed, then made my way to the security panel in the hallway. The red light was flashing like an angry eye. Rear door breach. My pulse quickened. Someone had tried to get in through the back door that faced the ocean. The motion sensor floodlights had already blazed to life, turning my small backyard into a stage lit for some midnight drama. I peered through the kitchen window, scanning the deck and the narrow path that led down to the beach. Nothing moved except the tall grass swaying in the ocean breeze. But the back door stood slightly ajar. I knew I'd locked it. Hell, I'd checked it twice before bed, the way Adeline used to tease me about checking the front door of our Portland house. Once is enough, Bernie, she'd laugh. The burglars aren't that determined. Apparently, these ones were all, against every instinct, screaming at me to stay inside and call the police. I stepped onto the deck. The October night air bit through my robe, carrying the salt smell of the sea and something else. The lingering scent of cigarette smoke. I moved carefully, my bare feet silent on the weathered planks, the baseball bat gripped tight in my arthritic hands. That's when I saw it. There, gleaming silver in the moonlight beside the damaged doorframe, lay a Zippo lighter. I bent down and picked it up, my fingers tracing the engraved letters on its side. Two simple initials that made a sense of unease wash over me. VB. Vernon Bradford, my son-in-law. The silver Zippo gleamed in the moonlight, and everything suddenly made sense. I stood there on that moonlit deck, turning the Zippo over in my hands. Vernon Bradford. The man who'd swept my daughter off her feet 2 years ago with his easy charm and perfect smile. Too perfect, maybe. Vernon had appeared in our lives like something out of a romantic movie. Tall, handsome, successful in real estate. He drove a late-model BMW, wore expensive suits, and always picked up the check at dinner. When Sienna brought him home for the first time, Adeline had whispered to me in the kitchen, "He's almost too good to be true, Bernie." Almost. The smart thing would have been to call the police right then, but something held me back. Maybe it was the accountant in me, the part that needed to see the full ledger before making accusations. Or maybe it was the father in me, the part that couldn't bear to shatter my daughter's happiness without being absolutely certain. No, I needed to understand what I was dealing with first. By the time the sun painted the Pacific in shades of gold, I'd made my decision. The first locksmith I called could be there by 9. "All the locks?" he asked. Front door, back door, windows. Everything, I confirmed. While I waited, I drove into town and found a security company. Had a break-in attempt, I explained to the technician. Want to upgrade my system. Smart thinking, she said. Most folks wait until after they've been robbed. By noon, I had 3 additional cameras, covering every angle, and every lock in the house had been changed. The old keys, including any copies Vernon might have had or were now useless pieces of metal. That's when Sienna called. Dad, how was your first night? Her voice bubbled with excitement. Was it everything you hoped? I looked out at the sparkling ocean, then down at the Zippo on my kitchen counter. It was, eventful, I said carefully. Actually, that's why I'm calling. We were hoping to drive up this weekend and see your new place. Vernon's been dying to check it out, and I want to make sure you're settling in okay. My pulse quickened. Vernon wanted to see the house. Of course he did. That sounds wonderful, I heard myself say. I'd love to show you both around. Perfect. We'll probably come up Saturday morning. Vernon said he knows a great restaurant in Mendocino. Apparently he's been there before on business. Has he now another piece of information that didn't quite fit? Saturday sounds perfect, honey. After we hung up, I sat staring at that silver Zippo, thinking about my son-in-law's eager interest in my new home, his mysterious business trips, and his convenient familiarity with my supposedly quiet little coastal town. I told my daughter I'd love to see them both, but first I needed to know exactly who Vernon Bradford really was. The next morning, with fresh locks securing my doors and new cameras watching every corner, I decided to follow the most basic rule of investigation that 40 years in accounting had taught me: follow the money. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the strong black kind Adeline used to say could wake the dead, and settled at my kitchen table with my laptop. Online banking had been one of those modern conveniences I'd resisted until Sienna finally set it up for me last Christmas. Dad, it's 2024, she'd laughed. You can't keep driving to the bank every time you want to check your balance? Thank God for pushy daughters. I logged into my checking account, first scanning the familiar pattern of automatic payments and modest withdrawals. Everything looked normal until I scrolled back a week. There it was, buried between my electric bill and a grocery store charge, a wire transfer for $15,000 to something called Coastal Investment Solutions. I stared at the screen, certain there had to be some mistake. I'd never heard of Coastal Investment Solutions, never authorized any wire transfer, and sure as hell never moved 15 grand without remembering it. A sense of unease washed over me as I reached for my phone. First National Bank Customer Service, this is Jennifer. How can I help you today? This is Bernard Coleman. I'm looking at my account online and there's a wire transfer I didn't authorize. $15,000 to Coastal Investment Solutions. Let me pull up your account, Mr. Coleman. I heard typing in the background. I see the transaction you're referring to. It was processed last Tuesday by one of our personal banking representatives, Elena Santos. She noted that you came in personally to request the transfer. Elena Santos. I'd been banking at First National for 30 years. I knew every teller, every manager, every face behind those windows. I've never heard of Elena Santos, and I certainly didn't come in to request any wire transfer. The typing stopped. Sir, are you saying this transaction was unauthorized? That's exactly what I'm saying. I need to see the security footage from last Tuesday. I'll need to transfer you to our fraud department, Mr. Coleman, and I'd recommend you come in as soon as possible. An hour later, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at the bank, watching grainy security footage on a small monitor. The branch manager, a nervous man named Peterson, kept apologizing as he fast-forwarded through Tuesday's recordings. There, he said, freezing the image. 11:47 a.m. That's Elena Santos with a customer. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The woman was tall, dark-haired, professionally dressed. She stood behind the counter, smiling as she processed paperwork. But it was the man across from her that made the pieces click into place. Vernon Bradford. My son-in-law, clear as day, sliding documents across the counter to a woman who had no business accessing my account. That's not me, I said quietly. That's Vernon Bradford. He's married to my daughter. Peterson's face went pale. Mr. Coleman, this is a serious matter. We'll need to file a police report immediately. Not yet, I said, still staring at the screen. Vernon looked relaxed, confident, chatting easily with his accomplice as they stole my money. I need copies of this footage first, and I want to know everything about Elena Santos. Sir, she doesn't actually work here. We have no employee by that name. Of course they didn't. I left the bank with a USB drive full of security footage and a growing understanding of just how deep this betrayal went. Vernon wasn't just stealing from me, he had help, and they'd been planning this for weeks. Driving home from the bank with that damning footage, I knew I was in over my head. 40 years of balancing books hadn't exactly prepared me for catching con artists. I needed professional help. The Yellow Pages, yes, I still use the actual book, listed 3 private investigators in the area. The first 2 sounded like they specialized in cheating spouses and insurance fraud. But Mike Torres, the third name on my list, had something the others didn't. 25 years with the California Highway Patrol before going private. His office sat above a coffee shop in downtown Mendocino, accessed by a narrow staircase that creaked under my feet. Torres himself was exactly what you'd expect from a former cop. Mid-50s gray mustache eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Coleman," he said, gesturing to a worn leather chair, "what can I do for you?" I laid out everything: the break-in, the Zippo, the stolen money, the fake bank employee. Torres listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a yellow legal pad. "Vernon Bradford," he said when I finished. "You got a photo." I showed him a picture from Sienna's phone. Vernon at last Christmas arm around my daughter, that perfect smile lighting up his face. "Give me 48 hours, Torres said. "If this guy's running a con, I'll find his trail." He called the next afternoon. "You're going to want to sit down for this, Mr. Coleman." Torres's voice carried the weight of bad news. "Vernon Bradford exists all right. Problem is, so does Victor Brennan. Same guy, different identity. The real Vernon Bradford died in a car accident in Nevada 3 years ago. Your son-in-law stole his identity." Everything suddenly made sense. The too perfect background, the vague answers about his past, the way he'd appeared in our lives like something out of thin air. "There's more," Torres continued. "Victor Brennan, that's his real name, has a record. Small-time cons, credit card fraud, identity theft. He's been working this angle for years, targeting older folks with money." My pulse quickened. "What do you need from me?" "Stay alert. Don't let on that you know anything. I'm still digging, but guys like this don't work alone. If he's got partners, they might be watching." I should have paid more attention to that warning. Leaving Torres's office an hour later, I felt like I was carrying a live grenade. The afternoon sun seemed too bright, every shadow too deep. I walked to my car with the measured pace of a man trying not to look over his shoulder. But I should have looked. The black sedan picked me up 2 blocks from the office. At first I thought it was coincidence, just another car heading in the same direction. But when I turned left onto Highway 1, it turned left. When I slowed down to let a tourist RV pass, it slowed down too. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. 20 years of driving the same routes to work had taught me every trick for losing tailgaters. But this wasn't some road rage maniac. This was professional. I tried taking the long way home, winding through residential streets I barely knew. The sedan stayed 3 cars back, patient as a predator. I pulled into a gas station, pretending to check my tire pressure while watching the reflection in my side mirror. The sedan parked across the street, engine running. When I finally turned onto my street, my heart was hammering against my ribs. The sedan followed me to within a block of my house before finally peeling off, disappearing around a corner like smoke. I sat in my driveway for 10 minutes, hands shaking on the wheel, staring at my rearview mirror. The black sedan had been following me for 20 minutes. Vernon knew I was investigating him. The black sedan stayed in my rearview mirror as I drove the winding coastal road toward home. What had started as surveillance was turning into something more aggressive. The driver was closing the distance between us. Dense fog was rolling in from the ocean, and there were long stretches where you wouldn't see another car for miles. Perfect for someone who didn't want witnesses. The sedan made its move just past Miller Creek Bridge, where the road narrowed and the guardrail was the only thing between you and a 100-foot drop to the rocks below. The impact sent my car lurching forward, tires squealing as I fought to keep control. My seatbelt cut into my chest as the sedan rammed me again, harder this time. The steering wheel spun in my hands like a thing alive. I slammed on the brakes, heart hammering, as my car skidded to a stop on the gravel. Steam hissed from under the hood, and I could smell burning rubber. In my mirror, the black sedan had pulled over about 100 yards back, engine-running headlights cutting through the fog. My hands were shaking as I got out to assess the damage. The rear bumper was crumpled, the back window spider-webbed with cracks. But it was the rear tire that made my pulse quicken. Someone had slashed it clean through the sidewall. This wasn't road rage. This was planned. The sedan's door opened, and a figure stepped out. too far away to see clearly in the fog, but the silhouette was tall, male, moving with purpose. I reached for my phone, fingers fumbling with the emergency dial. 911, what's your emergency? This is Bernard Coleman. I'm on Highway 1 about 5 miles north of Mendocino. Someone just attacked my car, and the distant wail of sirens cut through the night air. Not coming toward us, these were from town, probably heading to some other emergency. But the sound had an immediate effect on my stalker. The figure froze, then quickly retreated to the sedan. Sir, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. They're leaving now. The black sedan was already pulling away, disappearing into the fog like it had never been there at all. The tow truck driver who showed up 20 minutes later was a local guy named Pete. Nasty business, he said, examining my slashed tire. You sure it wasn't just road debris? I looked at the clean cut through the rubber, the deliberate damage to my bumper. I'm sure. Well, you're lucky you didn't go over the edge. This stretch of roads claimed more than a few cars over the years. Lucky, right. By the time I got home, courtesy of Pete's tow truck, it was past midnight. I sat in my kitchen doors locked and security system armed, staring at the Zippo lighter that had started this whole nightmare. 2 days ago, I'd thought I was dealing with a simple case of theft. Maybe a son-in-law who'd gotten in over his head with gambling debts or bad investments. But sitting there with the taste of fear still bitter in my mouth, I understood the truth. This wasn't just about money anymore. Vernon was willing to hurt me to keep his secret. Back home with my car in the shop and my nerves still rattled, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something crucial. Vernon and his accomplice had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. But what were they looking for when they broke into my house that first night? I found myself standing in the doorway of what used to be our bedroom, mine and Adeline's. I'd barely touched her side of the room since the funeral 3 years ago. Her jewelry box still sat on the dresser, her reading glasses folded neatly on the nightstand. Maybe it was the adrenaline still coursing through my system, but I found myself opening Adeline's closet for the first time since packing away her clothes for charity. There on the top shelf behind her winter coats sat a small wooden box I'd never seen before. My hands trembled as I lifted it down. Inside, I found a collection of papers in Adeline's careful handwriting. The letter on top was addressed to me, dated just 2 weeks before her heart attack. The envelope had never been sealed. My dearest Bernie. It began, and seeing her handwriting again made my throat tight with grief. I've been struggling with whether to tell you this, but I can't keep it to myself any longer. I'm worried about Sienna's boyfriend, Vernon. There's something about him that doesn't sit right with me. When Vernon told us he grew up in Sacramento, I called my cousin Helen, who's lived there her whole life. She'd never heard of the Bradford family he described, and the high school he claimed to attend. It closed down 10 years before he would have graduated. I hired a private investigator. Vernon Bradford's social security number belongs to a man who died in a car accident 3 years ago. The real Vernon Bradford never married, never had the successful real estate career our Vernon claims. Bernie, I think our daughter is dating a man who's stolen someone else's identity. I don't know what he wants from our family, but I'm scared it's not just Sienna's love. I've been watching him at family dinners, the way he asks questions about your work, about our finances, about the house. It feels calculated, like he's gathering information. I was going to show you the investigator's report tomorrow. I know this sounds dramatic, but men who steal identities don't usually stop there. Please be careful, my love. Protect our daughter, but protect yourself too. I have a feeling Vernon Bradford, whoever he really is more dangerous than he appears. All my love, Adeline. P.S. The full report is in our safe deposit box at First National. Box 247, you have the key. I read the letter 3 times each pass, making the pieces click into place more clearly. Adeline had known. 2 weeks before her sudden heart attack, she'd uncovered Vernon's deception and was planning to expose him. 2 weeks before she died, a sense of unease washed over me as an even darker thought crept into my mind. Adeline's heart attack had been sudden, unexpected. The doctors said it was just one of those things. But what if it wasn't natural causes? What if Vernon had discovered her investigation? I looked around the bedroom with new eyes, thinking about that first break-in, about Vernon and Elena searching through my belongings. They hadn't just been looking for money or valuables. Adeline had tried to warn me about Vernon. Now I understood why he'd broken in. He was looking for her letters. The next morning, I needed groceries and time to think. The revelation about Adeline's investigation had shaken me more than I cared to admit. As I locked up the house and headed into town, I made sure the new security cameras were recording. If Vernon tried anything else, I'd have proof. I should have stayed home. I was halfway through my shopping at the Mendocino market when my phone buzzed with a security alert. Motion detected at rear entrance. Then another. Front door breach. My hands went cold as I abandoned my cart and rushed to the parking lot. The drive home felt like an eternity, my mind racing through possibilities. Had Vernon found Adeline's letters? Were they destroying evidence right now? I parked a block away from my house and approached on foot, staying low behind the neighbor's hedge. Through my kitchen window, I could see movement. Two figures going through my belongings with systematic precision. Vernon was there, tall and confident, even while committing a felony. The woman with him had to be Elena Santos from the bank footage. She was rifling through drawers while Vernon examined papers at my kitchen table. My heart hammered as I crept around to the back of the house. The rear door stood open. They'd used keys, not force, which meant they'd copied my old keys before I changed the locks. Smart. Professional. I needed to get inside to see what they were after, but the only way in without being seen was through the garage. The side door was unlocked, another oversight on my part. I slipped inside, moving carefully between my workbench and Adeline's old gardening supplies. That's when I heard Vernon's voice clear as day through the thin wall that separated the garage from the kitchen. Find anything yet?" His tone was casual, like he was asking about the weather. "Nothing in the bedroom," Elena replied. "But there's got to be more." That old woman was thorough. If she wrote one letter, she wrote others. "Keep looking. The investigator's report has to be here somewhere." My pulse quickened. They were looking for Adeline's evidence just as I'd suspected. "What if we can't find it?" Elena asked. Vernon's laugh was cold, calculating. "Then we move to plan B. The old man knows too much. We'll have to deal with him permanently." The words hit me like ice water. Deal with him permanently. They weren't just talking about theft anymore. "You sure about that?" Elena sounded nervous. "That's a big step up from financial fraud." "Look around you," Vernon said. "This house, the bank, accounts the investments. We're talking about close to $2 million when you add it all up. That's worth taking risks for." $2 million. I'd never thought of myself as wealthy, but apparently Vernon had done his homework better than I had. "Besides," he continued, "it won't look suspicious. 70-year-old man living alone, recent stress from moving history of heart problems in the family. These things happen. History of heart problems, like Adeline. Everything suddenly made sense. Adeline's sudden heart attack, her investigation that was cut short just before she could expose Vernon. It hadn't been natural causes at all. "Grab those files from the desk," Vernon ordered. "We need to get out of here before he comes back." I heard footsteps moving toward the front door, papers, rustling drawers slamming shut. Then the house went quiet, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I waited 10 minutes before emerging from the garage, my legs shaky with adrenaline. The house looked like it had been hit by a tornado. Drawers pulled out, papers, scattered, cushions overturned. But they'd missed the most important thing. The wooden box with Adeline's letters was still hidden in the bedroom closet where I'd left it. More importantly, every second of their break-in was recorded on my new security cameras. I had them on video now, but Vernon's words kept echoing in my head. "That old man knows too much." That evening I sat watching the security footage for the 5th time. There was Vernon clear as day, rifling through my belongings. There was Elena searching for Adeline's letters. And there, captured in crystal clear audio, was Vernon's casual discussion of my murder. "The old man knows too much. We'll have to deal with him permanently." Before I went to the police, I had to try one more time to save my daughter. I called Sienna's cell phone, my hands trembling. "Dad, is everything okay?" "Honey, I need you to come over right away. It's about Vernon. It's urgent." "What about Vernon?" "I can't explain over the phone. Please just come, and come alone." She arrived within an hour, looking worried. I'd spent that time organizing my evidence like the methodical accountant I'd always been. The Zippo lighter sat on the coffee table next to printed screenshots from the security footage. Adeline's letter lay beside Mike Torres's investigative report. "Dad, what's all this?" Sienna asked, settling onto the couch. "It's the truth about your husband. I need you to listen to everything before you say anything." I started with the break-in, showing her the Zippo with Vernon's initials. Her face went pale. Then I explained about the stolen money, the fake bank employee, the security footage of Vernon with Elena Santos. This woman doesn't work at the bank, sweetheart. She's Vernon's accomplice. Sienna stared at the bank footage, her hand covering her mouth. That looks like Vernon, but there's more. I handed her Torres's report. Vernon Bradford died in a car accident 3 years ago. Your husband stole his identity. His real name is Victor Brennan. She read with growing horror, hands shaking. This can't be right. Vernon told me about his childhood. All lies, honey. I showed her Adeline's letter, watching tears fill her eyes. She was going to expose Vernon the day after she wrote this. Mom knew, she whispered. I don't think your mother died of natural causes, Sienna. My daughter's face crumpled. No, that's impossible. Vernon loved Mom. Listen to this. I played the audio from yesterday's break-in, Vernon's voice filling the room with casual talk of murder. Sienna listened in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face. When it ended, she sat staring at the evidence for a long moment. Then she stood up, jaw set with stubborn determination. Dad, I think you're being paranoid. This is all circumstantial. There has to be an explanation. My heart sank. Honey, please, look at the evidence. The evidence could be faked. The audio could be edited. She waved Torres's report dismissively. How do you know he's legitimate? Maybe Vernon has enemies trying to frame him. Sienna? No, Dad. I know Vernon. I've been married to him for 2 years. He loves me. He'd never do these things. She headed for the door, then turned back with tears in her eyes. I think you need help. Professional help. Living alone out here, all this stress. Maybe it's affecting your judgment. The words hit me like a physical blow. My own daughter choosing to believe a con artist over her father. I'm going home to talk to Vernon about this, and I think you should consider seeing a doctor. Dad, I think you're being paranoid. Vernon loves me. He'd never do this. Sienna drove home through the foggy night with her father's accusations echoing in her mind. The evidence had been overwhelming, but it couldn't be true. Vernon loved her. There had to be an explanation. She found Vernon in their Lake Oswego living room, reading with a glass of wine. He looked up as she entered, immediately sensing her distress. Honey, what's wrong? Sienna sat beside him, hands shaking. Vernon, I need to ask you about something. My father showed me some things tonight, about you. His expression shifted slightly. What kind of things? Bank records, security footage. He says you stole money from him, that you're not who you say you are. The words tumbled out. He has this investigative report saying Vernon Bradford died 3 years ago. Vernon took her hands. Sienna, sweetheart, I can explain some of this. Her heart sank. Some of it, the money, yes. I borrowed $15,000 from your father's account. There was this investment opportunity that couldn't wait, and I knew he'd want to discuss it for weeks. Vernon's voice was calm, reasonable. I was planning to pay it back with interest before he even noticed. You took money without asking. I borrowed money from my father-in-law to help our future. The investment has already doubled. He squeezed her hands. As for the rest, the identity theft, the criminal record, that's completely fabricated. But the investigative report. Honey, think about it. Your father is 70 years old, living alone, dealing with major life changes. He's been acting paranoid lately, hasn't he? Seeing threats where there aren't any. Sienna thought about her father's excessive security system, his constant worry, his suspicious behavior. He has been more anxious, she admitted. Vernon nodded sympathetically. Isolation can do that to older people. The mind starts creating elaborate conspiracies to explain normal events. He showed her his driver's license, social security card. With today's technology, anyone can fake audio recordings. He seemed so convinced. Of course he did. In his mind, it's all real. Vernon pulled her closer. Sienna, I think your father needs professional help. This level of paranoid delusion, it's not safe for him to be living alone. You think he's having a breakdown? I think he's a lonely, frightened old man, losing touch with reality. And I'm worried about what he might do next. Vernon stroked her hair. We need to consider guardianship proceedings for his own safety. The word hit Sienna like a cold slap. Guardianship meant taking control of her father's finances, his medical decisions, his entire life. That seems drastic. Is it more drastic than letting him spiral into complete paranoia? What if he hurts himself or someone else? Vernon's voice carried concern. We'd be doing it out of love to protect him. An hour later, Sienna called her father. Her voice was cooler, more distant. Dad, I talked to Vernon. He explained about the money. It was an investment loan. Everything else. Dad, I think you need help. Sienna, please listen to me. No, you listen. Vernon and I think you should see a psychiatrist. This paranoia, these delusions about murder plots, it's not normal. They're not delusions. Dad, Vernon's going to help me look into guardianship options. We can't let you hurt yourself. The line went quiet. When Bernard finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. You're choosing him over me. I'm choosing reality over fantasy. Get help, Dad. Please. She hung up, leaving Bernard staring at the phone in his empty house. My own daughter had chosen to believe the man who was trying to destroy me. After Sienna hung up on me, I sat in my kitchen staring at the phone for a long time. The house felt emptier than it ever had. Vernon had played his hand perfectly, isolated me from the one person who mattered most, turned my own daughter against me. In a few days, maybe weeks, I'd be facing guardianship proceedings. They'd declare me mentally incompetent, strip away my rights, my freedom. Vernon would have access to everything, unless I stopped him first. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and made my first call. Mike Torres. Mike, I need your help. Vernon's got my daughter convinced I'm having a mental breakdown. They're talking about guardianship. A low whistle. That's serious business. Once those proceedings start. That's why we need to move fast. I have video evidence of Vernon breaking an audio of them discussing my murder, but I need them to incriminate themselves so thoroughly that no judge will believe their story about my mental state. You're talking about a sting operation. Exactly. Can you help me set it up? Give me until tomorrow morning. I'll put together a plan. My second call was to David Whitmore, the lawyer who'd handled Adeline's will. I woke him up, but he listened as I explained the situation. Bernard, this is incredibly dangerous. If Vernon is as ruthless as you believe, he's already threatened to kill me, David. I'm 70 years old. How much more dangerous can my life get? All right, I'll prepare the legal framework and call in some favors with the district attorney's office. They need to know what's coming. My third call was to Detective John Parker with the Mendocino County Sheriff's Department. Detective Parker, this is Bernard Coleman. We met last week about the incident on Highway 1. I remember. What can I do for you? I laid out everything. The break-ins, the financial fraud, the death threats, Vernon's manipulation of my daughter. Parker listened without interruption. Mr. Coleman, why didn't you bring this to us sooner? Because I needed to be absolutely certain. And because I needed my daughter to be safe. If Vernon suspects official involvement too early, he might run or hurt Sienna. What are you proposing? A controlled confrontation. I lure Vernon into incriminating himself beyond any doubt with you ready to move in. Parker was quiet for a moment. It's risky, but given what you've told me, it might be our best shot at building a solid case. The rest of the night I spent preparing my house like a battlefield. I installed additional recording devices, tiny cameras Mike had provided, voice recorders hidden in every room. I tested the panic button that would alert the police, checked every angle. By dawn, my modest beach house had become a trap. I stood on my deck as the sun painted the Pacific in shades of gold, thinking about Adeline, about the daughter who no longer believed in me. Vernon had taken so much already, but he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated his opponent. If Vernon wanted to play games with an old man, he was about to learn that 70 years of experience wasn't a weakness. It was a weapon. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with Mike Torres's detailed plans spread out before me. The trap was elegant in its simplicity, used Vernon's greed against him. According to Mike's research, con artists like Vernon couldn't resist the promise of a big immediate score, especially when they felt cornered. He's going to be suspicious, Mike had warned. But if you play it right, his desperation will override his caution. I practiced my performance in front of the bathroom mirror, working on making my voice sound weaker, older, more frail than I actually felt. 70 years old, but I'd never been much of an actor. Today I'd have to be Oscar-worthy. At 2 in the afternoon, I made the call that would either save my life or end it. Sienna? I let my voice crack slightly, added a tremor that wasn't entirely fake. Dad, you sound terrible. Are you okay? I'm not good, sweetheart. I think I'm having some kind of episode. Chest pains, trouble breathing. I paused for effect, letting out a shaky breath. I'm scared, honey. Really scared. The change in her voice was immediate. Whatever anger she'd felt toward me vanished, replaced by pure concern. Dad, have you called 911? Should I call an ambulance? No, no doctors. Not yet. I need to see you first. There are things, important things I need to take care of while I still can. What do you mean? My will, the house, all of it. I've been thinking about what you said about getting help, and maybe you're right. Maybe I have been paranoid. The lie tasted bitter, but I forced it out. If something happens to me, I want to make sure you're taken care of. Sienna was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. Dad, don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. I hope so, baby girl. But I need to see you tonight. Can you come both, you and Vernon? I want to discuss some financial arrangements, transfer some accounts into your names, just in case. I heard muffled conversation, Sienna talking to Vernon in the background. Then she was back on the line. We'll be there by 7. Dad, please don't do anything until we get there, okay? If you're having chest pains. I'll be careful. I love you, Sienna. Whatever happens, remember that I love you. I love you too, Dad. We'll be there soon. After I hung up, I spent the next 4 hours turning my house into a surveillance center that would have impressed the FBI. Mike had provided equipment that looked like everyday objects. A pen that was actually a camera. A clock radio with a built-in microphone, picture frames with recording devices. Detective Parker called at 5:30. We're in position, Mr. Coleman. 2 units parked on adjacent streets, plainclothes officers in a van about a block away. You sure about the timing? Vernon will want to move fast once he thinks I'm ready to sign over my assets. He won't want to give me time to change my mind or involve lawyers. And if things go sideways, I looked at the panic button Mike had given me, now clipped inside my shirt pocket. Then you'll hear from me real quick. At 6:45, I dimmed the lights in my living room and mussed my hair to look like I'd been lying down. I put on my oldest robe, the one that made me look smaller, frailer. In the hallway mirror, I practiced my sick old man walk. Slower, more shuffling, like every step was an effort. At exactly 7 o'clock, I saw headlights sweep across my front windows. Vernon's BMW pulled into my driveway, and I watched through the security monitor as he and Sienna got out. Vernon was carrying a briefcase, probably full of documents ready for my signature. My pulse quickened, but not from fear, from anticipation. Vernon thought he was coming to claim his prize. He had no idea he was walking into a trap. I opened the door before they could knock, leaning heavily against the frame. Sienna rushed forward, her face creased with worry. Dad, you look terrible. Are you sure you shouldn't be in the hospital? I'm okay, sweetheart. Just tired. I shuffled toward the living room, playing up the frail old man act. Come in, both of you. We need to talk. Vernon followed his eyes, scanning the room. He carried a leather briefcase, his hand never straying far from it. Mr. Coleman, he said, voice perfectly calibrated with concern, Sienna's been worried sick about you. I eased myself into my armchair with exaggerated care, letting out a small groan. That's why I called. I've been thinking about what you said about getting help. Sienna perched on the couch edge, reaching for my hand. Dad, we just want what's best for you. I know, honey. Maybe you're right. Maybe I have been getting paranoid in my old age. The words felt like poison. That's why I want to get my affairs in order now while I still can think clearly. Vernon leaned forward, excitement flashing in his eyes. That's very wise, Mr. Coleman. I want to transfer my major assets into Sienna's name. The house, the investment accounts, everything. Vernon opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. As it happens, I took the liberty of having some documents prepared. Just basic transfer forms. He pulled out a stack of papers already filled out in neat typescript. Documents that would give Vernon legal access to everything I owned. These are very thorough, I said, squinting at the fine print. I should probably read through them carefully before signing anything. Vernon's smile tightened. Of course. Though they're fairly standard. I had my attorney review them. I read slowly, asking questions that made Vernon shift in his seat. This clause about financial management authority, that's just to help Sienna handle administrative details. And this section about medical decision making, standard power of attorney language, 20 minutes passed, then 30. Vernon's facade was cracking. He kept checking his watch, tapping his fingers. Mr. Coleman, he finally said, voice carrying a harder edge. These are just formalities. The sooner we get them signed, the sooner you can rest easy. I want to be thorough, Vernon. This is my life's work. Dad, Sienna said gently, Vernon's right. You look exhausted. Why don't you sign now and go over details later? I set the papers down. I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable signing these tonight. There are clauses I don't understand, and I'd like my own lawyer to review them first. Vernon's mask slipped completely. The concerned son-in-law vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. Your lawyer. His voice was flat dangerous. Mr. Coleman, you called us here saying you were having a medical emergency. You said you needed to get your affairs in order immediately. I changed my mind. It's my right. Vernon stood up, towering over me. Actually, it's not. Not when you're clearly suffering from dementia and making decisions that could harm yourself and your family. Vernon and Sienna looked shocked. What are you saying? But Vernon wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes were fixed on me with undisguised menace. Sign the papers now, old man, or you might have an unfortunate accident. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Sienna stared at Vernon in shock, her face pale. Vernon, what did you just say? But Vernon was past caring about maintaining his facade. The mask had slipped, completely revealing the predator underneath. You heard me. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. Your father's been a problem from the beginning. Too smart, too careful. But every problem has a solution. You're scaring me, Sienna whispered. Vernon laughed, a cold sound that made my pulse quicken. You want to know the truth, Sienna Fine? Your precious father is right about everything. I'm not Vernon Bradford. I stole that identity 3 years ago from a dead man. I've been planning this con since the day I met you. Sienna's hand flew to her mouth. That's not... You can't be serious. Dead serious. The break-ins, the stolen money, all of it. Hell, I even had to deal with your stepmother when she got too nosy. His voice was casual, matter-of-fact. Amazing how easy it is to trigger a heart attack in someone with the right medical history. You killed Mom. The words came out as barely a whisper. I solved a problem, just like I'm about to solve another one. The front door opened, and Elena Santos walked in like she owned the place. She was no longer dressed like a bank employee. Now she looked like what she really was, a predator, and she was carrying a kitchen knife. Sorry I'm late, she said to Vernon. Had to make sure the neighbors weren't around. Everything suddenly made sense. They'd planned this from the beginning. The fake illness call, the documents, all of it designed to get me alone and vulnerable. Vernon stopped this. Sienna jumped to her feet, positioning herself between Elena and me. This is insane. You can't just... Sit down, Sienna. Vernon's voice was ice cold. You're getting your inheritance either way. The only question is whether your father signs willingly, or we make it look like a home invasion gone wrong. I won't let you hurt him. Vernon grabbed Sienna's arm, his grip hard enough to make her wince. You don't have a choice. You think I spent 2 years playing house with you because I enjoyed it? You were a means to an end, sweetheart. Access to Daddy's money. Sienna tried to pull away, and Vernon shoved her backward. She stumbled, hitting the coffee table hard before falling to the floor. The sound of her cry of pain cut through me like a blade. Don't touch her. I started to rise from my chair, but Elena stepped forward with the knife. Stay put, old man. But something had changed in the room. Sienna was getting to her feet, and when she looked at Vernon now, it was with eyes wide open for the first time. You pushed me, she said, touching the bruise already forming on her arm. You actually put your hands on me. Sienna, I didn't mean... No. Her voice was stronger now, clearer. You meant it. You meant all of it. She looked around the room, at Elena with her knife, at Vernon with his briefcase full of forged documents, at me sitting helpless in my chair. Dad was right, about everything. Vernon's expression hardened. It doesn't matter what you think now. We're too far in to stop. Yes, it does matter. Sienna moved closer to my chair, her body language shifting from victim to protector. Because I'm not going to let you hurt my father. For the first time since this nightmare began, Vernon looked uncertain. He'd counted on Sienna's blind loyalty, her refusal to see his true nature. But that illusion was shattered now, lying in pieces on my living room floor. In that moment, Sienna saw Vernon for who he really was and chose to stand with her father. With Sienna now standing against him, Vernon's desperation turned to rage. He looked at Elena, who still held the knife, then back at my daughter. "You stupid girl! Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I've chosen the right side," Sienna said firmly. That's when I pressed the panic button hidden inside my shirt pocket. Vernon lunged toward me, but I was ready. 70 years old or not, I still had a few tricks left. I grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the side table and swung it hard, catching him in the shoulder. He stumbled backward, cursing. "Elena now." She rushed forward with the knife, but Sienna was faster. She grabbed the poker from the fireplace and swung it like a baseball bat, connecting with Elena's wrist. The knife clattered across the hardwood floor. "Run, Dad." I didn't need to be told twice. I scrambled toward the kitchen, Vernon close behind me. My arthritic knees protested, but adrenaline kept me moving. Behind me, I could hear Sienna on her phone. 911. "This is Sienna Bradford. My father is being attacked at 1247 Coastal Drive in Mendocino. Please hurry." Vernon tackled me just as I reached the kitchen doorway. We both went down hard, my shoulder hitting the floor with a crack that sent pain shooting down my arm. Vernon was younger, stronger, but I had something he didn't. I was fighting for my life, not just money. I rolled away as his fist came down where my head had been, then grabbed the closest thing I could reach. A cast-iron skillet Adeline had used for 40 years. Vernon saw it coming and threw up his arm to block it, but the impact sent him reeling. "You crazy old bastard." "Crazy like a fox," I gasped, struggling to my feet. Elena had recovered the knife and was advancing on Sienna, who was still trying to stay on the line with 911. Vernon snatched the phone from her hand and threw it against the wall, where it shattered into pieces. He reached for the knife Elena was holding, and that's when I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens. Vernon's head snapped toward the window. Through the glass, we could see red and blue lights painting the fog in brilliant colors. "How?" Elena demanded. Vernon's eyes found mine, and I saw the moment he understood. "You set us up. This whole thing was a trap." "Sat, 70 years of experience," I said, breathing hard. "You should have done your homework better." The front door exploded inward as Detective Parker and 3 other officers burst through with weapons drawn. Mendocino County Sheriff, nobody move. Vernon still had his hand in Sienna's hair. Elena still held the knife. For a moment, everything froze like a photograph. "Drop the weapon!" Parker shouted at Elena. "Now!" Elena looked at Vernon, then at the officers, then at the knife in her hand. Slowly, she set it on the floor and raised her hands. Vernon released Sienna and stepped back, his hands up. "This is all a misunderstanding, officers. This man is suffering from dementia. He called us here and then attacked us." "Save it," Parker said, approaching with handcuffs. "We heard everything. The whole house is wired for sound." Vernon's face went white as the implications sank in. Every threat, every confession, every casual admission of murder, all of it recorded in crystal clear digital audio. "Vernon Bradford, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, breaking and entering, and conspiracy to commit murder." As the handcuffs clicked around Vernon's wrists, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: victory. 3 months later, I sat in the Mendocino County Courthouse, watching Vernon Bradford, or Victor Brennan as the court records now showed, face the consequences of his crimes. The man who had terrorized my family, stolen my money, and murdered my wife looked smaller somehow in his orange jumpsuit, flanked by public defenders who knew they were fighting a losing battle. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Hours of recorded audio security footage, bank records, and testimony from multiple victims painted a picture of a career criminal who had finally overplayed his hand. "Mr. Brennan," Judge Patricia Hernandez said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "you've pleaded guilty to charges of identity theft, wire fraud, burglary, assault, and conspiracy to commit murder. Do you understand that by accepting this plea agreement, you're admitting to these crimes?" Vernon nodded, his voice barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor. While these crimes would normally carry a sentence of 20 to 25 years, the court acknowledges your cooperation and full restitution agreement. You are sentenced to 12 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole in 8 years. contingent on continued good behavior and victim compensation. 12 years. It still didn't seem like enough for what he'd put us through. But Mike Torres had explained that without being able to prove Adeline's murder, definitively, this was a strong outcome. The plea deal guaranteed Vernon would serve significant time and pay back everything he'd stolen. Elena Santos received 8 years for her role as an active accomplice. During the investigation, Detective Parker had discovered she'd been the operational mastermind behind similar schemes targeting elderly victims in Oregon and Northern California. Her banking expertise had made the financial fraud possible, and she'd personally threatened multiple victims with violence. The most difficult part of the proceedings was watching Sienna take the witness stand. My daughter had insisted on testifying against Vernon despite the obvious pain it caused her. He manipulated me completely, she said, her voice steady but her hands shaking slightly. He made me doubt my own father, the man who raised me and loved me unconditionally. Vernon Bradford, Victor Brennan, is a predator who destroys families for money. When she stepped down from the witness stand, she walked directly to where I sat in the gallery. Dad, I'm so sorry. For everything. For not believing you, for choosing him over you, for almost letting him destroy our family. Tears streamed down her face. Can you ever forgive me? I pulled my daughter into my arms right there in the courtroom, not caring about the stares from other spectators. There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. You were a victim too. The financial restitution took another month to sort out, but eventually I recovered not just the $15,000 Vernon had stolen, but an additional $25,000 in damages and legal fees. More importantly, the investigation had uncovered evidence that strongly suggested Adeline's death hadn't been natural. While we couldn't prove murder in court, knowing the truth gave me a sense of closure I hadn't expected. 6 months after Vernon's sentencing, Sienna and I stood on my deck, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of gold and crimson. She'd been visiting every weekend since the trial, helping me tend the small garden I'd started in Adeline's memory. Do you think Mom would be proud of us? She asked, leaning against the railing beside me. I think she'd be proud that we fought for each other, I said, that we didn't let him win. Sienna nodded, wiping away a tear. I should have trusted you from the beginning. Should have known that 70 years of wisdom was worth more than 2 years of lies. I put my arm around my daughter's shoulders, feeling more at peace than I had since Adeline's death. Vernon was serving 12 years in federal prison. Elena was paying for her crimes with 8 years behind bars. The truth had come out, and justice had been served. But more importantly, I had my daughter back. 6 months after Vernon's sentencing, I found myself exactly where I'd always wanted to be. Sitting on my deck overlooking the Pacific, watching the morning fog roll in from the horizon. The same view that had drawn me to this house in the first place, but now I saw it with different eyes. Sienna's laughter drifted from the kitchen, where she was making her famous blueberry pancakes, a Sunday morning tradition we'd established since the trial. She visited every weekend now, sometimes bringing friends, sometimes just wanting to spend quiet time with her old man. Our relationship was stronger than it had ever been forged in the fire of betrayal and tempered by truth. Dad, breakfast is ready, she called out. Coming, sweetheart. But I lingered for another moment, thinking about how much had changed in the year since I'd first heard that alarm at 3:15 in the morning. At 70 years old, I discovered something that surprised me. Age wasn't the weakness Vernon had assumed it was. It wasn't the liability that society often portrays it as. Those 7 decades of living, of watching people, of making mistakes and learning from them, they'd been my greatest asset. Every line on my face represented a lesson learned. Every gray hair was proof of experience gained. When Vernon looked at me, he saw an easy mark, a confused old man living alone. What he failed to recognize was that I'd been reading people like him my entire adult life. Adeline had taught me that, in her quiet way. Bernie, she used to say, people always show you who they are. The trick is learning to listen with your eyes, not just your ears. She'd been right, as she usually was. Vernon's performance had been flawless to the untrained eye, but Adeline had seen through it immediately, and eventually so had I. The predators of this world count on older people being isolated, confused, easy to manipulate. They assume that age equals vulnerability, but they're wrong, dead wrong. 70 years of life had taught me to trust my instincts, to question what seemed too good to be true, to value the people who'd earned my trust over decades rather than months. It had taught me that real love doesn't come with conditions or hidden agendas. Most importantly, it had taught me that experience isn't just knowledge, it's wisdom. And wisdom, properly applied, is the most powerful weapon against deception. I thought about the other families Vernon and Elena had targeted the lives they'd destroyed before we stopped them. How many elderly victims had there been who didn't have the resources or support system to fight back? Too many, probably, but not this time. This time they'd picked the wrong target. Sienna appeared in the doorway, spatula in hand. "Dad, are you coming? The pancakes are getting cold." I stood up, stretching muscles that complained less than they used to, and smiled at my daughter. "Just enjoying the view, honey. It is beautiful out here," she agreed, joining me at the railing. "I can see why you love it." "It's not just the view," I said, putting my arm around her shoulders. "It's the peace, the knowledge that we fought for what mattered and won." As we headed inside for breakfast, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete contentment. The bad guys were in prison. My family was whole again. And I'd learned that being 70 wasn't about winding down. It was about being wise enough to recognize when someone was trying to take advantage of you, and strong enough to fight back. Looking back at this true story, I realize how close I came to losing everything. Not just my money, but my daughter and my dignity. Don't be like I was in those early days, trusting too easily and ignoring the warning signs. When someone seems too perfect, too eager to help with your finances, trust that little voice in your head. The biggest lesson from my true story age isn't a weakness, it's your superpower. Those 70 years weren't just time passing, they were decades of learning to read people, to spot lies, to trust my instincts. God gave us wisdom through experience for a reason. We shouldn't be ashamed to use it. These grandpa stories might seem dramatic, but financial predators target older adults every single day. They count on us being isolated, confused, or too proud to ask for help. But my true story proves that with careful planning and courage, even a 70-year-old can outsmart professional con artists. My advice: install security systems, change your locks regularly, and never let anyone pressure you into signing financial documents. Most importantly, don't let anyone convince you that your concerns are just paranoia. Grandpa stories like mine aren't just entertainment. They're warnings that could save your life. Savings. These grandpa stories happen to real families every day, and we need to share them to protect each other. What would you have done differently in my situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button to hear more stories like this one. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your story could help protect another family from becoming the next victim.